My nanny told my kids I was the reason their father left. I found out when my daughter asked me why I made Daddy cry. My daughter is 4 years old. She asked me the question on a Tuesday evening while I was washing her hair in the bath. Mommy, why did you make Daddy cry? I went very still. The water was still running. I turned it off and asked her where she heard that. She said Miss Sandra told her. She said you made Daddy sad and that's why he doesn't live with us anymore. And she said sometimes mommies do things that hurt daddies and the daddy has to go away. I kept my voice completely even. When did Miss Sandra tell you that? She said at lunch. I finished washing her hair and wrapped her in her towel and put her to bed and read her the story she asked for and kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Then I walked to the kitchen and stood at the counter for a long time. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. From something colder. My husband Daniel had moved out 4 months earlier. The marriage had broken down over 2 years and the separation had been mutual and relatively civil. He still came to school pickup twice a week. He was still their father. He was still present. And Sandra had spent a Tuesday lunchtime explaining to my 4-year-old daughter why Daddy wasn't home anymore and whose fault it was. Here's what Sandra didn't know. When I hired her 8 months earlier, I had done what every working parent does. I installed nanny cams. 3 of them. 1 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the playroom. They recorded continuously and stored footage to a cloud account on my phone. I had checked them occasionally in the first few weeks and then stopped because there was never anything concerning. I had trusted her. So I opened the app that night after the children were asleep and started with that Tuesday. I found the lunchtime footage within 6 minutes. Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table with my daughter and my 6-year-old son cutting their sandwiches and talking in that warm, quiet voice she used when she thought no one was listening. Your daddy is a really good man, she said. Sometimes when mommies are difficult, it makes daddies very sad and they have to make a hard decision. Your daddy loves you very much. It's not his fault he had to go. I sat with that for a moment. Then I went back further. 3 months back. What I found over the next 4 hours turned my stomach. 14 separate incidents across 11 weeks. Sandra telling my son that daddy seems so much happier now. Sandra telling my daughter that when mommies don't try hard enough, daddies have no choice but to leave. Sandra calling Daniel from the house phone after drop-offs and reporting on conversations she had overheard between me and the children. Sandra telling my daughter that Miss Sandra would never make daddy sad. I closed the app at 2 in the morning. I called my attorney at 9 the next day. She told me what I had was substantial. Breach of trust. Emotional manipulation of minors. Potentially actionable depending on what those phone calls to Daniel contained. She told me to preserve every second of footage immediately. So I transferred everything to an external drive and a second cloud account and emailed copies to my attorney before Sandra arrived at 8. Sandra came in that morning exactly the same as always. Keys on the hook. Coat on the chair. Coffee on. Good morning, she said brightly. I looked at her from across the kitchen and placed the termination letter on the counter. She looked at it. She looked at me. Her face went through several things very quickly. I know what you told my daughter, I said. And I know about the phone calls. Her mouth opened. I have all of it on camera and my attorney has copies. She stood in my kitchen for 30 seconds without saying anything. Then she picked up her coat and her keys and left without a word. I called Daniel that afternoon, not to fight, to tell him what I had found. The silence on the other end when I described what Sandra had said to our children went on long enough that I thought the call had dropped. He said he hadn't known. His voice was flat in a way that told me he was telling the truth. He asked if he could come and see the footage. He sat at my kitchen table that evening and watched 40 minutes of recordings without saying a single word. When he looked up, his face had an expression I had never seen on him before. He fired Sandra himself that same night from his phone. He sent her a message I didn't ask to read. Then he looked at our daughter's drawing on the refrigerator and was quiet for a moment. We need to tell them something simple and true, he said. Something that doesn't sound like anyone's fault. I agreed. We sat at that table for 2 hours and talked the way we should have been talking for the last 2 years. Sandra had a reference request pending with the agency she came from. I contacted them the following morning with a full report and copies of the relevant footage. She was removed from their books by end of day. I didn't celebrate that. I just made dinner and helped with homework and read the bedtime story. My daughter asked me that night if mommies and daddies could still be friends. I told her yes. I told her that was exactly what we were going to be. She seemed satisfied with that. She rolled over and went to sleep. So did I.